Tugbo Park, Burmine Scheme, Festival City, Claybrick Scheme. These are housing schemes. And what they have in common, Mr. Speaker, is that they were established pre-1992. Mr. Speaker, Budget 2025 with the theme, A Secure, Prosperous, and Sustainable Guyana. The PPP administration is asking approval to spend just under $1.3 trillion. I put it in this context because it is important to understand that this money belongs to the people of Guyana. Not the PPP administration, but the people of Guyana. Whether it is a grant, a loan, or revenues earned through taxes, duties, sale of goods, the money belongs to the people of Guyana, all the people. So when the administration comes with a budget, it is really the administration requesting a sum of money from the people of Guyana. And in return for that money, specific goods and services will be provided by the administration. Now, we all know the administration, when it comes with the appropriation bill, will use its one-seat majority to pass it. But as we heard in this very House, Mr. Speaker, it's not about how much you spend, but how you spend. And we heard that from the government side of the House. Like budgets presented by the PPP before, we have concerns that many of the returns that the people expect will not be met. For example, in the past, we have seen billions being given to Gaisuku, and I know there's a sore point, but production continues to dwindle. My colleague, the Honorable German Figueres, spoke of this, and I endorse what he said and urge that his recommendations be examined, because it is the natural expectation of the people that they will get sugar in return for the money, their money, given to Gaisuku. We can argue for the rest of this debate on who destroyed the sugar industry and go back to the days when the army and police had to cut cane because of strike action called by the PPP-led GAU, or reports of factories being sabotaged, or the 6.4 billion loan that was taken to build the White Elephant, Skeldon factory, and continued spending to fix the unfixable, that folly. Money should have been used instead to retool Rosal Estate, Enmore Estate, Wales Estate, knowing full well that the loss of the EU preferential market would result in US dollars 37 million annually. The PPP administration, many of them still here today, went ahead and borrowed heavily, banking on sugar. The Skeldon factory was touted to produce 110,000 tons of sugar. Money borrowed, money spent, loan with interest placed on the backs of Guyanese. Or we can debate how the EU was forced to hold back on funding for the ailing sugar industry when Parliament was prorogued. Mr. Speaker, Dr. Ashley Singh, the Honorable Member, in his 2011 budget presentation, said 2010 was a disappointing year for sugar. The signs were there. Sugar was failing. There's a whole long history of what caused the decline of the sugar industry. The time does not permit me to expand on. But the PPP would want the nation to believe it was the APNU coalition government that crippled sugar. Ask the Vice President who it is who said, if Skeldon fails, sugar is dead. Mr. Speaker, when money is taken for education, the people rightfully expect their children to pass their exams as proof of their education. So it's hard to understand how millions can be given to an entertainer to construct a school, and we have seen the result of such folly. Similarly, millions given to a social commentator to construct a pump station, and all the people have to see for their money is comment free. Mr. Speaker, We have the Honorable Vikram Bharat here in this house, and I think the Vice President may be online. And they can tell you about the multilateral schools and how those schools were constructed and the programs offered. Fully functioning gym, as what you would find in the more developed nations. Music rooms, like you would find in the more developed nations. Today we have schools that don't even have an area for children to play. But somehow or the other, we want to talk about holistic development of the children. When money is taken for health care, Mr. Speaker, then the people have a legitimate expectation to go to a health center or hospital and receive care and treatment. They don't expect and should not have to appeal on Facebook for assistance. Almost every day you go to Facebook, there's someone begging for assistance to get medical care. In oil-producing Guyana, the fastest growing economy in the world, where GDP is skyrocketing, people have to take to social media to beg for assistance to cover medical bills. Only yesterday, there was a news report of a young mother accusing the health sector of negligence that resulted in the death of a baby at birth. Today, a teacher at Wakapau, Hinterland Village, Amerindian community, is seeking assistance to cover her medical bills. The village council has joined in asking for help for her. The administration and their supporters would want to say, well, Rome wasn't built today in a day. Well, it wasn't a day. It was 23 plus 4.5 years of the PPP administration and trillions of dollars later. Just the last 4 years, from 2021 to 2024, the PPP spent over $2.863 trillion. But while their focus is continued on spending, the other side of the equation, the people's expectations remain unmet. Mr. Speaker, colleagues on this side of the House who have spoken before me bemoan the failures in the education sector. And I'm sure that many who will come after me will also highlight where education is failing. And let me say this, Mr. Speaker. We don't view education as a political football. We don't view health as a political football. And this is because of our recognition that a sustainable Guyana, to quote from the budget theme, cannot be achieved if we continue to fail to educate our children. Mr. Speaker, if I'm to focus just a bit on what is happening in education at the primary level, and I'm using data as provided in volume 2 of the budget, indicators. The percentage of children scoring 50% or more in all subjects at the NGSA in 2024, it was 34%. And this year, the administration is hoping to bring that up to 40%, which means that even if that target is reached, more than half our children will still not be having a sound primary education. Mr. Speaker, I spoke of this during the 2024 budget debate. A year later, we are still in the same sad position. Mr. Speaker, we can never hope to develop as a nation when we are failing to provide basic primary education. 27 years of PPP and primary education, the basic building block of the education system, is failing miserably. It is no wonder, therefore, that we have such high dropout rates at the secondary level. When the system fails a child at the primary level, that child finds it difficult to cope at the secondary level. Feeling overwhelmed, the child is more inclined to drop out of school. This in return leads to criminal behavior later in life. But I guess the policy of the PPP is to ignore the reality, continue to do what they're doing, and which clearly does not work, have our children continue to fail, wait until they turn to criminal activities, then try to teach them in penal school. Can't understand it. Mr. Speaker, providing classrooms, passing teachers through training college, providing textbook, as what was the practice even prior to the PPP in office. Hot meals, all of these are important, and we support them. However, when an environment is created where teachers are demotivated, then you defeat the positive impact that all those prior things just like beggars, forcing them to stand in the broiling sun for $100,000 cash grant that could have been given to them at the inception using the same system through which they received their salaries. But no, make them stand in the sun and so show them who is boss. Teachers had to stand on the picket line on strike for a scanty top up to their salaries. And then, in an attempt to destroy their solidarity, their unity, the administration is fighting against the process of deducting union dues. This is to stifle the teaching profession of its collective bargaining power. If there's another reason, I'd love to hear it. The PPP administration could stand here and scream and shout until doomsday of what they've done. But bottom line, as from the statistics they have provided, after all the spending, the chest beating, the clashing of cymbals and all the noise, our children are not coming out of school with an education, most of them. Mr. Speaker, school is no longer a safe space. Instead, we have gangs operating in schools, unheard of a few short years ago. Teachers are forced to operate under a cloud of fear. Children are being assaulted right in the schools. Where is this secure Guyana? Again, taken from the theme of Budget 2025, secure Guyana. Where is that secure Guyana for our teachers? Very 10 children are failing math. Where will the next generation of engineers, technicians, welders, architects come from? We do not provide an education system where children are passing in math. And Mr. Speaker, if I'm to turn to post-secondary education and the TVET rates, Mr. Speaker, the story is not much different. It is the same dismal performance, enrollment, and even those who enroll, how they're absorbed into professions, into the labor force. The data as provided by the PPP administration tells a very dark and dismal picture when we look into the future of this country. And as I'm on the topic of data, Mr. Speaker, please let me remind that we're still waiting on the 2022 census. This is 2025 and we cannot have the 2022 census. Again, money spent and nothing to show for it. How can proper planning for sustainable development be done when you don't even know the present status of households? Or is it the data of oil, which Guyana is too shocking, would reveal too much? Are they looking to re-engineer the data? And that is why the census has not yet been released. Moving on, Mr. Speaker, I know my colleagues will speak more about the sector. Mr. Speaker, now I can't sing to save my life. But there's a very popular gospel. We are a chosen generation. All I require for life, God has given me. Mr. Speaker, every Guyanese ought to be rejoicing. Rich, fertile land, gold, diamond, other minerals, fresh water. Ours is a land of abundant resources. Then, of course, there's the bounty that's been harvested in our exclusive economic zone of our coastline. Every Guyanese should be enjoying nice time. But the sad reality is that too many of our people are forced to exist. I cannot say live. They are forced to exist, somehow survive in poverty, while they watch on as the bounty of their land is exploited to enrich a few. Mr. Speaker, in the prayer at the commencement of our sitting, we implore divine guidance from words that come from the depth of truth. But I would, if I could, I would have done probably a Robert De Niro impersonation and say to my colleagues over at that side of the house, you cannot handle the truth. Because the truth is that only the friends of the one Guyana are enjoying the bounty of this land. And the truth of the masses that 48%, they cannot even afford proper nutrition. 20% of our children are living in severe food poverty. The PPP administration may want to split hairs and argue over food poverty, malnutrition, undernutrition, but the bottom line is for 20% of our children, their parents can barely afford to provide 2 food groups per day, when 8 are needed for adequate child nutrition. This is the data from the United Nations Children Fund. Child food poverty, addressing nutrition deprivation in early childhood 2024. Mr. Speaker, the same report stated that 40% of our children in Guyana are experiencing moderate child food poverty because they are fed 3 to 4 food groups per day, barely half of what is needed. That is the truth of the masses. And this is happening in our country, an agriculture-based economy, now with the added bonus of oil, the fastest growing economy in the world. Mr. Speaker, parents cannot afford sanitary napkins for their teenage daughters. Mr. Speaker, that is the truth of parents, and it is recognized by the PPP. But instead of helping parents, enabling them to provide for the young ladies, the PPP steps in with cameras and full media exposure showing the world that they are providing sanitary napkins for our young women. The Menstrual Hygiene Initiative to End Poverty.
Honorable member, you will need an extension to complete.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the honourable member be given 5 minutes to conclude our presentation.
Thank you, honorable member. You may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Chief Whip. Mr. Speaker, what that program does is that it exposes our young women to taunts and derogatory remarks, and even to the prime prince of pedophile. In a country earning from its oil resources alone $6 to $4 million each hour, fathers and mothers cannot afford to provide sanitary napkins for their daughters. That, Mr. Speaker, is the truth of poverty in oil-rich Guyana. In our country where our GDP almost doubled by the first half of 2024, poverty abounds. Mr. Speaker, in this fastest growing economy with 1.3 trillion to be spent this year, family will still have to depend on remittances from abroad. But now with the Iceman making his rounds, many families may find that source of fund no longer available. Instead, they may have an additional mouth to feed. Mr. Speaker, there are groups across Guyana, mainly women. They call themselves prayer warriors. I believe that as a nation, we owe them a debt of gratitude that we cannot repay. Each morning they pray for our nation. And it has to be these prayers that keep us going. How else can our single mothers keep food on the table, send their children to school, pay the bills when earning 100,000 or less a month? How else other than by a prayer can those young women working in restaurants and supermarkets survive? Our sweeper cleaners, our security guards in the private sector, laborers. When the opposition brings attention to the spiraling cost of living, the response is, well, cost of living is going up all over the world. True, but we are the chosen generation, blessed to be living in the land of plenty, more natural resources than most countries. Yet in this land of plenty, the masses are forced to survive. Mr. Speaker, I wanted to spend some time talking about media relations and the money that's going to be given to, what is it termed? To increase trust of information provided by the Government Information Agency. Mr. Speaker, the history of media relations of the PPP when they're in office is one of victimization and intimidation. We've not forgotten when Channel 6 was closed down, when a reporter was debarred entry to press briefing at the office of the president, when the advertising doll was weaponized and used against Starbuck News. Mr. Speaker, the fourth estate is an integral part of any democracy, as any other part of the three arms of government, the judiciary, the legislature, the administrative. The fourth estate is that link between all of government and the people. So it is disrespectful to anyone in government office to refuse to answer questions on matters of state, even if they are answering those questions from the party office. And so, Mr. Speaker, we will be paying attention and questioning allocations there. In closing, Mr. Speaker, let me take this opportunity to thank all those public servants who went through the frustration of trying to put a budget together that would benefit the people of Guyana. And to the masses, the 48% living in poverty, I say to those people, Mr. Speaker, long time done, short time left. Mr. Speaker, as I said, health is not a political football. Education is not a political football. They're too important to the development of our country. And so, Mr. Speaker, the AFC in government will adopt a policy that will see an inclusive approach to fixing our education sector. Civil society, the business sector, the government, the opposition, and I hope that the Honorable Minister, present Minister of Education, the Honorable Priya Manikchan and the Honorable Sonia Parag, Priya Manikchan. Okay, great. I hope that those two ministers will at least lend their effort because, Mr. Speaker, we do need to know what not to do. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Honorable.